Hey, Kentucky, this is Mary Jo Perino. Tonight, health leaders continue their message about staving off COVID-19. What does the June primary mean for November? And Serena Williams isn't the only big-name tennis player headed to Nicholasville. All that and more is next on Hey, Kentucky. Welcome into Hey, Kentucky, along with Jennifer Palumbo tonight. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Mary Jo. How's it going?
It is going well. We have made it to day 3 of our time together, and so far so good, right?
Yes.
I feel like we're doing okay.
Oh, it's been a blast. I love this. It's girl power.
Yes, ma'am. Let's keep it rolling. This is not great, but cases of COVID-19 rather continue to surge in Kentucky, as we know. Some local and national health officials are reminding us of the importance of taking precautions. Louisville's top public health official is re-emphasizing the basic measures to prevent the spread: masking up, sanitizing, and social distancing when you leave the house. The reminder comes as cases in Louisville and Lexington have spiked.
I think people are tuning out these messages, and it's unfortunate because we have a quickly spreading wildfire on our hands and people seem to be oblivious to the flames. We need every person to use every resource they have to douse the flames of the wildfire, to stomp out every burning ember. Each of us has to fundamentally rethink the way we go about our lives.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says his concern has shifted to states in the Midwest. He called out Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and Kentucky specifically, saying they are showing an early indication that cases of COVID-19 are going up. And New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has added Kentucky to a travel advisory that consists of 34 states, meaning travelers are required to quarantine for 2 weeks upon arrival in New York from those states. Jennifer, literally, if we have to say mask up, wash your hands, and socially distance one more time, I'll go nuts. How do we not know this yet?
I know, but but a little bit of encouraging news from Governor Beshear's briefing today that the mask mandate may actually be helping. The number's 619 cases. It's a little bit more than yesterday, and the positive rate is 5.81. But he says he thinks we're starting to see a stabilization, which would be great news because we need to get that surge under control.
We got to flatten the old curve again. All right, a small group of unemployed Kentuckians assembled peacefully today outside the governor's mansion. Many of them just have nowhere else to turn at this point. They say the calls they've received have been nothing more than lip service. Some have gotten help, but not even close to the level they're entitled to. Others haven't seen a dime, and it's been months since they filed, and even longer since they lost their jobs. And with the moratorium set to expire on evictions, one man's landlord has already knocked on the door. He hasn't been able to pay the rent for 3 months after losing his job.
He's already called me and told me that something's got to be done soon, or I'm going to have to make other arrangements. And I'm not even from here, so I don't have family here. I don't have anybody here. All my family's up north, so I'm pretty much facing the streets if this don't get fixed.
Meanwhile, Kentucky has reported another potential data breach in the unemployment system. But Jennifer, there's about 1,500 renters just in Lexington that are facing eviction, maybe more than 200,000 people around the state. We could have a real homeless crisis on our hands.
Absolutely, and we've talked about too that August 1st being a really important date because these people are losing that $600 a week that they were getting from the federal government, and while they're fighting in Washington, meanwhile these people are facing eviction notices, and if they didn't pay their rent for the last 3 months, they weren't off the hook for it. They still have to pay that. So these are some tough times ahead.
They are, and you know, on the flip side, their landlords also need to make their bills. So it's really, we got to figure something out. We are less than 100 days away from the general election, and Kentucky is starting to plan for it by taking a look back at the primary. Secretary of State Michael Adams spoke in a committee in Frankfurt about the election and how it can help shape the general one in November. He says one big takeaway is that absentee voting worked.
Not only did we make it convenient, but we made it virtually fraud-proof. Although we are still planning for the November election, I can tell you right now, absentee voting will be a big component of that. Even if we don't expand absentee voting beyond the current classes of voters who qualify for it.
Adams said they're looking into the load capacity of absentee ballots county clerks and post offices can handle to see if expansion is possible, but he's not confident they can fully replicate what was done in the primary election, since he expects turnout in November to be 250% higher than in June. Adams also said that county clerks support expanding in-person voting in November, so there are opportunities over a number of weeks rather than one day. And I think, Jennifer, if we took something from the primary election, we do have to have a few more in-person places rather than piling everybody into a football stadium.
And right, and yet we still had record primary turnout in June, so it worked. But what did they do going forward in November? Absentee voting. You know, right now you have to have an excuse or a medical reason. That needs to be absentee voting, no excuse, like it is in Ohio, where if you wanted to vote absentee, you could. They need to make it easier, and the early voting in person will help, because right now the poll is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That limits a lot of people who can vote on election day.
It really does. We've got to have in-person voting that has expanded times, right? Even if it's for 1 week or a couple of days. Yeah. All right. With the school year quickly approaching, some people are concerned that students have fallen behind as a result of learning from home instead of the classroom. Glasgow High School in Barron County is anticipating most of their students to return in person for instruction this year. During the remainder of the spring semester, the high school focused on reviewing their current material rather than learning new material. This helps students to not fall behind without in-person instruction. Principal Amy Allen emphasized how teachers and staff have changed their curriculum for this fall to include blended learning and how education is changing in the eyes of this pandemic.
Look at it from the glass half empty or the glass half full, and we're choosing to look at it from the glass half full and really use this time to rethink education and to make sure that our students feel that they're individual and that we look at their strengths, we look at their passions, and we take it from there.
About 20% of Glasgow High School students have opted for virtual learning this fall, with both virtual and in-person learning beginning August 25th. And Jennifer, that's right around the time where most schools are getting started. But yeah, to me, we've learned that we need to have that interaction with teachers in person.
We certainly do. And I like this hybrid approach, though, and the fact that they're saying, you know, that they don't want students to have to worry about falling behind, because students and their families have so many other worries right now. And also, are they really falling behind? Is there a behind at this point? You know, you just don't know, because the whole school system is so different than it was before the pandemic.
And like or hate standardized tests, at least they gave you a little bit of a benchmark of where students were and where grade levels were. And those are gone, or they were gone this spring.
Right. At this point, we don't know.
Yep. All right. One Kentucky city has made a change that could serve as an example to leaders in other communities. Faced with a tight budget and rising demand on its 17-officer police department, the city of Alexandria in Campbell County tried something different. Instead of hiring an additional officer and taking on the added expenses of equipping that officer, the police chief at the time hired a social worker to respond in tandem with officers. The department now employs 2 full-time social workers to work and respond with its 17 officers, and there's been a significant drop in repeat 911 calls, with approximately 15% fewer people going to jail.
I'm more of a second responder, so the officer responds first. There are times that I do go on scene with the officer, but that's after it's secured and safe for me to enter. But I try to assist the family in whatever services they need, so they don't have to, when they're having a crisis or having a situation that they need law enforcement, they don't have to call 911.
The former chief says the results in Alexandria, which is a city of less than 10,000 people, could be replicated in larger cities like Louisville, where officers responding to calls involving mental health, domestic disturbances, and homelessness an average of once every 10 minutes. And I think this is phenomenal. And this is one of those things that, amidst all of the protesting that we've talked about, is a way to make real change, is to bring in experts in mental health to be alongside police in some of these calls.
to be on the front lines. And I hope this is something that we see this catching on across Kentucky, because they are there and they can help people on the scene instead of having to be called in. And you know, he said it saved $45,000 to $50,000 a year, and that's a good side effect as well.
Absolutely. Everything seems positive about that. It can also de-escalate situations much more quickly.
Yes.
Right up next on Hey Kentucky, we'll talk sports with regular contributor Maggie Davis. That includes news that Serena Williams isn't going to be the only big name on hand for the tennis tournament going on in Nicholasville. Stay with us.